So, is your wife one of the 62% of women who say they have the fantasy about being ravished? Well, I'm Leslie Dories, your marriage coach and creator of the Hero Husband Project and owner of Foundations Coaching. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. This very, very common fantasy of women to be ravished. Now, the first thing that I need to say to you is that being ravished is not being raped. No woman on the planet wants to be raped. And this could be a little bit confusing because the first definition of ravish is to take by force. What women really want is the second definition of being ravished, which is to just experience this wonderful, emotion of intense delight and enrapture. That's really what she's wanting. And a lot of women struggle with this fantasy as well because they think that somehow it means they're giving up control. And what it actually is it's allowing her to give in to the wonderful feelings that you are bringing about for her. And the thing about women is that for a lot of us, we got to get out of our heads. And if we're having to pay really close attention to what's happening, then we're in our heads. And I actually have a client, Tom, who's basically really given up on having sex with his wife because it's turned into what they both feel is an instructional session. And I'm going to tell you, that is not a turn on. It's a turn off for most guys because they feel like they're being corrected. And it's a turn off for most women because we're having to think too much. And what we want to be doing is we want to actually be feeling. And, as like I said, this could be really, really confusing. Now, this is really about you guys stepping in to your masculine energy with confidence so that she can step in to her feminine energy. Now, again, I'm not talking about being aggressive. Don't grab her by the hair and drag her off to the bedroom. But it's about coming to it with this sense of, I know what I'm doing. And my goal is to make you feel so fantastic that you're going to want to do it again sometime. And some of this may have to do with traditional ways that women were never supposed to enjoy sex. So if they're kind of taken in a way, then they don't have the guilt. I don't think that's happening so much now, but a lot of this really is a lot of what's going on in the bedroom, guys, is really this back and forth about who's in control. And and this is not a place where we want to be in control. This is a place where we want to be connected. And one of the things that a lot of men do not understand is that there's a large majority of women who have what is known as responsive desire, meaning their libido, they actually don't feel like having sex until they're physically aroused. This is part of the whole why foreplay is so important. And a lot of times, guys, why your wives do not initiate sex. They're not thinking about it until their body starts to get turned on. And that's what this ravish fantasy is really about. It's about this somebody else is doing these things that make me feel fantastic. And what this requires, guys, is a sense of confidence, right? And I, and it's not the confidence that you're never going to touch her in a way that in that particular moment she doesn't like. But don't fall prey to the idea that just because she says don't touch me there right now doesn't mean have to understand what turns her on. And there are a lot of clues, many of them subtle, but how is she moving her body? Is she making pleasurable noises? Is she lubricating? And one of the things that happens is knowing what it's knowing where to touch her, when, and how. And sometimes this changes. And I realize that this can play with the confidence, but that's what this ravishing is that you're taking charge, you're leading this. And I'm going to tell you, and again, it's not a fantasy that you have to engage in all the time, because, it is important that sometimes you're the one who's receiving the pleasure. But this fantasy is very, very common. And if your wife is one of the people who has this fantasy, and I don't know, you may or may not know, and I would suggest asking, because it's not necessarily a fantasy that women will volunteer, because for some reason it makes us weak. It doesn't. It's about the male-female, masculine-feminine dynamic. And if you want to have greater intimacy and sex with your wife, if you want to be the guy who turns her on, this is one of the ways to do it. It can be really touchy, like my client who stopped because, nobody, we don't want to turn this into a clinical thing, although we do have to understand how each other's bodies work. And when you have this confidence that you are a good lover, that just, I'm going to tell you guys, it works. She wants that. She doesn't want to be despite what she may say, she does not want to be in charge all the time. But in order to do this, you actually have to have a relatively good relationship with her. And so if there are some areas in your relationship that you're struggling with, I'm sure intimacy is being impacted by this, but there is a way out of this. And if you're interested in that, then I invite you to do a couple of things. One, I would love to hear your comments. Two, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel. And three, get in touch with me and we'll talk about this. You can reach me by direct message, putting a comment down below, or you can send me an email at leslie@foundationscoachingnc.com. And hopefully this has been interesting, because if this is your wife, this really gives you an interesting and fun way to really have a great time. So until next week, stay loving.